This is Change is Possible podcast, and I'm your host, Ani Filipova. There is always a time in your career when you feel stuck, uninspired, and you're looking for a change. That's why I created this podcast, to help you make your career change possible. Each of our guests has made a successful career change, and we are going to discuss practical advice, actionable tips, and inspirational stories that can help you to get unstuck and transition into the work that you love. Let's tune in. Hi everyone, this is episode 21 of the Change is Possible podcast. Let me introduce you to my guest today, Stella Kasdagli. She's the former editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine in Greece, and following over 10 years working there, Stella realized she needed to make a career change. During this time, she co-founded Women on Top as a side hustle. Today, it is a non-profit organization for the professional development of women and gender equality in the public sphere. Stella is an author of 8 books, has translated more than 30 books, and has won multiple awards. Among them is the National Book Award of Young Adult Nonfiction. Stella has experienced some interesting career changes, which I am excited to delve into and learn from today. Hi Stella, great to see you and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Annie. Great to see you too.
We had an interesting chat as a preparation to the podcast, and you told me that you studied French literature. And that sounded very strange to me because I can't imagine. I mean, what were you planning with French literature? What kind of job you were thinking you're going to have? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. Well, I had no plan whatsoever. To give you some background, this was part of my adolescent, I don't know what I want to do with my life phase. My initial decision was that I would like to study to become a translator and an interpreter. I did finally become a translator, but my goal then was to be an interpreter and, travel the world and work for the European Commission and for international organizations and get to know so many things. So then the translation school in Greece was outside of the normal examinations that kids had to pass after they finished school. So I had to wait until September to pass my exams. But my parents were not very comfortable with that. So they wanted me to pass the general exams just in case. And I hadn't studied at all. I had terrible marks. I got terrible marks in my general exams. But French literature had very low entry scores points. I don't know how it's called in English. The passing level was so low that because I knew so well French, I don't anymore because I haven't spoken French for a while now. But I used to know very well French then. So although I messed up history and Latin and everything else, basically, because I got a great mark in French, I passed. And then what happened was September came, I passed my translation exams with flying colors, and I had to move to Corfu, which is a Greek island, for those of you who don't know Greece very well. So the school is in Corfu, the university is in Corfu, and I had to move there. But when I visited Corfu, I realized that it's such a rainy island with such a, special character and very moody and somewhat dark during the winter. And I was a depressed teenager at that time. So I really didn't want to spend 4 years in a gloomy island. Although I love Corfu now, I wasn't ready to live there at that point. So because I had passed in the French literature school, I said, well, so did I will study French literature and I will become a translator after that. And that was the story.
Well, I've done 20 episodes. This is the 21. And And in almost every episode, everybody said the same thing. They didn't know what they wanted to do. Everybody without exception. It's funny. So, and then you finish school, and how did you decide about your first job? What do you wanted to do after that?
So I still wanted to be a translator, and I had started working as one during my first year in university. So the first books I translated were, how do you call those in English? You know, these cheap ones you sell at newsstands, the romantic ones, romantic
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, that one. So I have translated about 20 of those. It was my
Oh wow.
university job. Yeah. Uh, so at some point I got bored and I thought, what do I want to do? And I really loved magazines at that time. And just a few months before I started university, we had a new publisher for Cosmopolitan magazine in Greece. So, you know, a new season for the magazine in Greece. And I was really excited to be reading the articles, which were a bit, you know, a bit lifestyle feministy. So I was very excited about that. And I thought, well, maybe they do have some translation work for me. So I called them and I said, do you need translators? So I started working as one. And then I started writing for them. And then I became an assistant editor. And then I left for London to do my master's. But then I came back as an editor in chief in Cosmopolitan. So, long story short, I stayed there for about 13 years in total.
13 years, yeah. And again, when we spoke earlier, you told me about all the ups and downs of your cosmopolitan years. So can you walk us through these and lessons learned, experiences? Can you share everything that you shared with me before?
Sure. Now that I'm counting again, it was actually 11 years in total.
Quite
So,
a long
yeah,
period of
it
time.
was a long period. So, the first thing I learned was that I was really good at calling people. So it was a very useful lesson for me that when I want something and I know that I have the skills to do it well, I actually can ask for it. And even though I didn't know anyone, I could start forming relationships with people I didn't know. And this was a huge learning for me even before I passed the door. And then when I started working there, apart from the work ethic that writing and journalism requires, which is something that I learned during my years in the magazine, how to be, you know, on time and how to stick to deadlines and how to be a team player. These are all things I learned while I worked here. But the other thing I learned, which I think may be even more useful long term, was that it was really, really important for me to work in a job that had a purpose, that aligned with my values. And I know that this is something we talk a lot now, you know, after I would say 2010, it has become like mainstream conversation, but it wasn't really at that time. And sometimes we talk about values and you know purpose at work, but we don't really know what we mean. For me, it was crucial to know that I was working in an environment that tried, sometimes more successfully, sometimes less successfully, to empower young women. So it might have been a magazine that, you know, focused on sex and relationships, but at the same time, we had lots of advice about being financially independent and how to go about your dreams and how not to feel trapped by societal stereotypes about your gender. And at the same time, we got letters from girls from all over Greece who had so many questions about how it is to be a woman and how it is to be a young woman in Greece. So this was very important for me. And I realized that it would be very, very hard to work in an environment which didn't align with my values. And the last thing I learned, which was the sad thing, I suppose, was that when I don't feel aligned with the work I do, I am not really good at it. And it's important for me to be good at what I do. So it was a hard lesson for me to learn that when, this cycle came to a close, came to an end, it was really time for me to go. Otherwise, I wouldn't be good at what I did.
I see. So you learned this quite early in your career, which was very helpful. People battle with this all their lives, and then they're sorry about things they haven't done. So how? Tell me about a bit more about the decision to leave. How all this developed, and this is also the other factor is that you were a single parent at that time, and that I guess was even doubly more difficult to take such a decision, but you did it. So it's really great to share your experience and some tips to other women who might listen to this and relate with exactly your experience.
So the decision, I mean, the realization that I wanted to leave came slowly, gradually, in, I would say, three levels. One was the natural cycle of things, life cycle of things. I think it's not possible at this age and time to be in a job forever and still feel fulfilled, especially in a job that's creative, like writing and editing a magazine that is quite age specific. I would say that I had grown out of it. So one part was that. And another part under the same umbrella of the life cycle of things was that I was, I am a person who loves continuity. And that was a time when internet became a big thing in Greek media. So I couldn't really wrap my head around the fact that we now had to write 10 or 11 articles each day and upload them in a website. And the next day we had to do the same thing all over again. I mean, the pace was too fast for me, not in terms of work, because I'm a workaholic, I think. So work never frightened me, but the sheer pace of it all was very exhausting for me. The fact that I made something that disappeared after 2 hours. I didn't like that. The second thing was financial because we had just, I would say, no, we were still in a financial crisis, and I couldn't see this job sustaining me for a long time after I left. So this was a big factor for me, and I felt I could do better. And then there is some point where relationships, which is a very important thing for me at work. I need good working relationships. Sometimes they reach a point where they are not functionable anymore. So I think these were the three main factors that helped me make that decision. It wasn't an easy one. First of all, because I loved the place, and I had formed relationships with people, as I said. Second thing was, as you said, I was a single mother, so I had a huge responsibility, financial one, to be independent and to be able to provide for my family. And this was not a great time to, stay unemployed. And I didn't really have a plan. I mean, I knew I could write. I knew I could still be a translator and work as a translator. but I didn't have a big career plan. Like, I'll do that, and then I will do that, and then it will be great. But yeah, I had, first of all, I had to be true to myself because, as I said, I felt that I was not good at my work anymore. And the second thing was that I had to be true to my daughter. She might have been like 3 years old at the time, but I still knew that I wanted to teach her what I, preached.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to be consistent in what I said to her and what I really did.
Great. So when you were leaving, did people understand you? And I know that generally most of people kind of think it's a crazy decision. So how did you overcome this? Because left, right, and center, everybody is telling you, no, this is not right. How did you go through this?
Yeah, it's true. I don't think I found like three people who said this is a great idea. I found 300 people who said this is a terrible idea, but I didn't find three who would support me, in essence. But for me, it was clear, you reach a point where there is no decision to be made anymore. The decision has been made. You know that you need to leave. Otherwise, you will be depressed, or you will be bad at your job, or you would be financially non viable. So when maybe it's my personality that is like that, but when I reach that point, there is no going back for me, and it doesn't matter how many people tell me otherwise. So I suppose I closed my ears, which is not a hugely, this is not a great advice at many situations, and it's not maybe the most responsible thing to do when you are a parent and you need to listen to other people. But for me, it was the best thing that I did at that point.
I see. So you hear them, but you don't listen to them because you hear what they say and you're trying to find, okay, what is the good thing they're saying? Is there something that can help me? And you can't find anything and you don't listen to them. I guess that's how it develops.
Yeah, I suppose that, during the first months, I would run the advice in my head and look for answers. If I
Hmm.
found the answers, the next time that I got the same advice, I knew that I already had the answer. So I didn't have to go through the same process again because the advice was not so different every time. I mean, it was like, you have a stable job. Well, this job is not stable anymore. I knew that, but you were happy at your job. Well, I'm not happy anymore. But you have a kid. Well, I want to be consistent with my kid and, do what I preach. So
Hmm.
I had looked for the answers and I knew they were there. So I didn't have to doubt myself every time.
Oh, I see. That's actually quite good what you said because you found the answer. You had thought about it, you found the answer, you were happy with the answer, you were happy with the consequences, and you moved. Great. So tell me, how did you do financially to support yourself leaving a job?
I think the most conventional thing that I did, and the most responsible at that time was that my only red line was that I wouldn't leave without a severance package. I wouldn't leave without, any money in the bank.
Mm,
And because I
yeah.
had been there for quite a while,
Mm.
my severance package was such that I could support myself and my kid for, say, 1 year, 1 year and a half. So if I was careful. So that
Mhm.
was my only red line, that I would only leave that place with some money in the bank. And then I knew that I have the translation job going on. So I tried to be as proactive with that as I could, uh,
Mhm.
because I knew I would be a freelancer from now on. So I had to build my network, to do business development, to
Yeah.
to get out there and meet people and get people know that this would be my job in the future. So I did all that. I was very careful with my finances. I asked for help when I didn't needed it. And I think that these three things got us through. And there were months that I felt that this is very risky, but it was a level of risk that I was comfortable, taking and sleeping with.
Hmm. I see. Okay, so tell me about the book writing. You said that you wrote several books. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the inspiration came about and when did you write them? Was it before, after you left?
I think lots of women who are ambitious, professionally ambitious, fear at some level that even when they have kids, their career will stall or that they will fall behind in their careers. And this was a fear of mine as well. But the reality was that my kids were such an inspiration and a force for me, not only personally, but also professionally, that I think I wouldn't be who I am today, personally, both personally and professionally, without my kids. And I don't mean I would be better professionally, in no way. I would be much, much worse. So I started writing my first book when I was pregnant with my first daughter back in 2010. And it was a blog about my pregnancy and first time motherhood. I wanted to talk about how it's not all rosy and happy and you know
Easy and,
easy.
heavenly.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to talk about the real feelings, which sometimes were hard for me. And writing was the best way I knew to talk about these feelings. So I started a blog, and at the beginning, I thought that only me and my husband and some friends would read it. But gradually, it gained a huge readership. And after my daughter was born, I decided to submit it as a book to 4 or 5 publishing houses. Most of them said no, we don't publish blogs, but one said yes. So my first book came out when my daughter was about 1 year old, and it was published by Patakis Editions, and it did well. But I think the best thing it did for me was that when I took it in my hands, I realized that I could maybe write a second book. On purpose that this
Great.
time.
Yeah.
And
One step leading to another step to a
yes,
third step.
yes, exactly. You build your confidence as you go. And because I'm an anorexia survivor, I knew that my second book would have to do with that. So I wrote a young adult book about anorexia nervosa, bullying, and teen relationships, etc. And this became a big success in Greece. I still go to schools and talk about that. It was shortlisted for the National Book Award for Young Adult Literature, so it went great. When I fell pregnant with my second daughter, I decided to write a book series for younger children, which is called Princess Athena, and is about an unconventional princess that does things her way. And then my latest book was 30 Women Who Changed the World and How You Can Change It Too. And this was the hardest book I have ever written, but it won the National Book Award for young adult nonfiction. And yeah, hopefully it will not be my last, but
Yeah. That was actually my next question. Do you think you write more? I'm sure you will.
I will. Yes, I think I will. Just the pandemic was took a toll to my writing, but yes, I will write more.
Great. Let's talk about Women on Top. How the idea for the organization come? How did you found it, and how did it develop?
Sure. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I started wondering about my professional future and how I wanted to be and where I'll go from there. So I started thinking that I would like to have a mentor, a woman who has worked in the same field that I have and has had the same questions and concerns about her career. So I thought that there should be a place, like a network or a community, where any woman could find a mentor, irrespective of her professional field. I mean, either she was an entrepreneur or an elementary teacher or a sales person or anything really. That she could find someone who would help her move forward in her career and answer her questions. So in 2012, together with my first co-founder, Galini Liopoulou, we created a Facebook group and we said that's what we want to do. Just send us your CVs if you have more than 2 years of professional experience and send us your questions, your concerns about your career, if you have one. And we will try to match those two. So we matched mentors with mentees, and it kind of grew out of that. At first, it was just a mentoring network. Today is a nonprofit organization that works in many different fields, the individual empowerment of women around professional and economic development. We work with companies and organizations on their diversity and inclusion efforts. And then we do research and advocacy campaigns to advance women's equality in the public sphere.
Great. And what do you think were the key factors for success? So if somebody wants to establish organization just like this, what do they have to think about? What do they have to plan? What are the obstacles?
I think there is not one way to do this. If someone wants to do it our way, they need to have a lot of patience because it's not something, what we did was not something that scaled fast. It was something that was built painstakingly with, great effort, no money. I mean, we got no investment and no funding for like 6 or 7 years, and we got no salary either. But we were able to bootstrap and build it from the ground up, and feel that it was born out of our work. And this was a huge plus for us. We also built our community that way. We built our community one person, one woman at a time, one organization at a time. So you need to have great partners. You need to have patience. You need to have a vision and to know your why you do that. You need to be able to do many different things at once. And you need to be open to learning every day.
I see. So you started building Women on Top when you were still working, right? It was a side interest, so to say, and it continued to be a side interest for quite some time, right?
I had no idea that it would become my main job because when it started, mentoring and women's empowerment was very, very new in Greece. I mean, in that wave, at least. But then Me Too happened, and the discussion started, gaining momentum, and our work started gaining momentum, and one worked along with the other. So at some point I realized that we had a great community and a great opportunity, and that this was maybe a professional future for me. So I started devoting more time to it, and then it gave me back more to keep up giving.
Yeah, great. Very well said. So, what were the things that you were not prepared for when you start working for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. You will laugh with the answer.
No, 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 I will not.
Oh, you will. The thing that was hardest for me, because I worked in a publishing environment, as I mentioned, I worked in magazines. So the thing that was hardest for me was the fact that I didn't have a designer's team to give a visual identity to all the things I had in my mind. Because when I worked in publishing, when I worked in Cosmopolitan, I knew that when we wrote an article or when we wanted to visualize something, we could go to the graphic designers and ask for what we wanted. But when I became a freelancer and I had to bootstrap, so I didn't have real money to pay for a graphic designer, I had to find a way to give an image to my ideas. And I think this was the hardest thing for me.
I can imagine. And how did you solve this? Very interesting.
I think that for a few years, when I didn't have the resources to invest something like that, I kind of dismissed it. So I tried to persuade myself that it was not that important, and that helped me not feel, as an imposter. That helped me go forward without feeling that I was less than. And then when what we did started becoming successful, it was that at that time that I realized that this is an investment. Imagine is an investment, and we really need to build that. And it was a huge game changer for me and for the organizations, for our organization, when we started investing in design again.
We're towards the end of the podcast. What I loved about everything you shared, Stella, is the unconventional way to approach things, right? Because you surprised me on of almost all the questions. Because when I asked you about the visual designer, and I thought you say, "Oh, I use Canva," "Oh, yeah, it's this or that," and I said, "No, I just ignored it." I've never heard such an answer, honestly. But it worked. It worked for you, and it also proves your point that everyone will do it their own way, and there is no one way which is the truth, and then every other way doesn't work, right? Amazing. So give me. So I'm now very interested what you're going to say. What are these three three key takeaways for people who want to make a change in their career and with that change their life? Well, what do they have to do?
I think that the number one thing that I started doing early in life, but I know this is not the norm, is to self reflect. And I mean both self reflect before you do something and know why you are doing something, why you are choosing one thing or the other. And but then also self reflect after you've done something and think about what went well, why it went well, what didn't go well, and what you want to change next time. I think that this is really important in any decision you make, but especially in these big decisions that carry many risks and many rewards at the same time. The second thing I would say is don't ever change your career path or your job or your anything in order to prove something to someone, but do it only if you want to learn something new. There is no point in doing that, in taking all that risk and investing so much time and energy in something new just in order to prove something, because then it means that you believe that you know everything or you know most of it, and in reality you know almost nothing. And you will, in order to be successful, you need to keep learning. So if you are not open to learning, and learning goes hand in hand with failing, it's not going to work, in the long term at least. And then the third thing that I believe many women get, and men get too long to understand it, is that you can't build a network, you can't build a community based on your needs. Your need is to build an authentic community, and this needs to come before you need something. So you first need to invest your time and your energy in building real connections. And in order to build real connections, you have to be interested in other people. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So you need to build an authentic network, and then when you need something, your network will be there for you, and your community will be there for you. But you can't really build a community based on your needs.
Great. That was a great ending to the podcast. I was really delighted to speak to you. Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. I love your podcast.